I don't normally do videos back to back, 2 days in a row. But I just, there's something that came to my mind I just wanted to share with you. So hopefully I'll just keep this brief. I know everybody's busy. But this is kind of a cool thing. Just a second here. At least it is for me, right? And then you get to where you want to share it. So driving in my truck, just thinking of things, listening to things. I don't have Sirius radio or anything like that in my truck. Usually I'll have my phone hooked up, and if I'm going any distance, I'll be listening to a podcast or something. That's what most of you do. You're not wasting your time. But sometimes I guess wasting time is listening to music or something. I don't think so. I love music. So, but I was listening to the news about the tariffs and the stock market. This is just so interesting to me to see the uneasiness of people that would normally be very supportive of Trump and everything that's going on with the first, from the election to inauguration and to executive orders and things happening at the border and all kinds of things going on. People that like Trump were very supportive and there was an excitement. Well, with many, that's worn off with the stock market going down because a lot of people's retirement or just investments are tied to it. And just the general feeling of the economy, the people, how people are feeling. And so you're seeing just this. It's so funny to watch people that would normally be, like I say, supportive of Trump. There's a hesitancy, well, yeah, this isn't good, blah blah blah. Well, okay, so as I'm driving, listening to this, I have this insight. So I call Sue. She's driving. It's a long story, but we were tag teaming, if you will, and not tag teaming. We were going in different directions, doing things. Anyway, so I tell her this insight, and she adds to it, and I'll tell you what that addition is. So here's the thought. I love the scriptures, as you know, and I like to liken things. I think the Old and New Testament, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price, these sacred records and scriptures and revelations give us a kind of a standard of how things should work or the reasons why things go the way they do. And so for me, it just comes natural to compare situations. And so with this situation, the thought came into my mind of the children of Israel in Egypt. They're in bondage for 400 years, thereabouts. And bondage is an interesting thing because I think we sometimes think of it, I think it was more like how we read in the Book of Mormon of the Jaredites. They're still, they're taken captive and that, but they have families and, they're able to function and do, but they're in bondage, right? You read that and you think, this has got to be a little different than maybe what we would visualize or see on the big screen. When someone's in bondage or slavery, we think of ragged clothes, being whipped, and doing just the most menial labor that you can imagine. Now, I'm sure there were cases of that, but I don't think the children of Israel for 400 years never intermarried, interbred, if you will. I don't know if you call breeding... that's more of an animal thing than a human thing. but assimilating more, you could see the Israelites assimilating more of the Egyptian culture and everything else, and actually being part of it. it happened with Joseph, it happened with Abraham to some degree. And so we which was, way further, it was before that, right? But still, I'm sure there were remnants of that, right? And we know Joseph married an Egyptian woman, who came, which Ephraim and Manasseh came from her, and from Joseph. So we have these situations where for that many years you're going to have some mixing of the pot, if you will. So along comes Moses. We probably have the image of Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments, and the guys, making the mud bricks, the old crippled up men, with their feet in there, and they're getting whipped if they can't do it fast enough, and then they mix it with the straw, and we have that image, and so we this is all we think about, and so Moses comes to free the slaves, or to free them, and in a sense, he's a very Christ-like figure. So it's not, we shouldn't blame the Jews of not necessarily recognizing Christ as the Savior, because Moses did do that. He did rescue them in a sense. But this is just my personal opinion, I don't think everyone was totally on board with the leaving. Of leaving Egypt and going to the Promised Land, but there's a million people. There's a ton of people that do go and want either a better life, want to follow the Spirit, and get back to worshiping their God. I'm sure there was just a mixture. Some maybe just looked for opportunity, to go somewhere and do something different. In any event, you have these people and that follow their leader, Moses. They leave, and there's all these miracles that happened before, but some of them were, very, let's just say they weren't warm and fuzzy miracles. They were miracles that cursed Egypt, and the Hebrews, the Israelites, were protected if they did what they were supposed to do, particularly with the firstborn. So they leave, and a lot of them have gold, jewelry and gold and everything with them, which is kind of interesting because that could either have been taken, acquired, just it was theirs to begin with, which then that goes, well, then were they really slaves? Or the Egyptians were just so sick of them, they just said, take this stuff and, just leave, kind of thing. So there's possibilities there. Well, they leave and they get to the crossing of the, if you look at the Red Sea, you have it from north to south, it comes up and then it branches off into those two little fingers at the top of a map. Anyway, you'd look, closer to the Mediterranean where the Suez Canal would be. But that's where the crossing would have been. And you have the parting of the Red Sea. Like one of the greatest miracles ever. And celebration. They make it. They get past. The Egyptian soldiers are drowned as the waters come back. So there's this excitement. And this is where Sue added to this, because I was comparing, this time period of the Israelites leaving Egypt and being rescued from bondage or slavery, and going to the Promised Land. But Sue added, she said, yeah, and think of how excited they were for this new adventure and this great miracle that happened. And she said, it's kind of like when Trump was elected, for people that, really wanted him and were supporting and following him. It was like, this is a miracle that he won with all the opposition and all the stuff going on in the last election, how it turned out. This is a miracle. And he won all the swing states. He won the popular vote. He won the electoral vote. Electoral vote. He really, it was a celebration, and that continued to be a celebration. He survived 2 assassination attempts, miracles, right? So all these things, kind of Moses-like in a sense. And I'm not comparing. I guess I am. I am comparing, in a way, Donald J. Trump to Moses, but not in a spiritual sense. Okay, so don't go there and make rude comments. I had some really nasty comments on the last one, which I get, but it's fine. Don't think it bothers me. It doesn't bother me that much. It used to, but I don't. It's just interesting how fired up people get. So you compare that with the people leaving Egypt, the Israelites. They're leaving Egypt. They have this great thing, and then where do they go into? As soon as they're liberated, they go into the wilderness. They go into the wilderness, and I think this is so interesting how we view the wilderness, and how what happened to a lot of the Israelites. They were like, this is nuts. Let's go back to Egypt. We had food. Everything was kind of taken care of for us. We didn't have to make decisions. We didn't have to be in survival mode. And really a lot of backlashing with Moses. So this is what we're going through right now. We're in a wilderness, economically in a sense, with these tariffs. And the stock market, which was, in my opinion, fake anyway, false wealth. People's bank accounts were just skyrocketing and everything going up and doing nothing. And then next thing you know, it's down and people aren't doing anything. And it's just kind of fake. It's not like you did some work or you provided a service and then you get something in return. I guess investing money is providing something, but I don't know. It's just kind of fake, in my opinion. Not that I haven't been involved in the stock market before. I've mutual funds and all this kind of other stuff. But for the most part, it just seems phony to me, right? So when you have these tariffs, we've basically been in bondage to other countries by countries manufacturing things. We've become a consumer country. We're the largest consumer country in the world, and our production of what we produce is drop. And a lot of it is because of these tariffs and how we got behind or backwards on tariffs. Well, the cheap labor, laws that don't apply in the United States, where things can be manufactured with not only with labor and safety and emissions, pollutions and all those things. We can get a product here cheaper, and we've become addicted to it. We've become a slave to it, in a sense, to these products. And so there's this element of freedom, but with freedom comes responsibility. And it's hard to deal with if you haven't had that responsibility. And so you start thinking, dang, I just lost $50,000 in the stock market. I just lost 100,000, 200,000, 800,000 with the investments that I had with my retirement or this or that. And I want to go back to where we were, where there were these huge trade imbalances, where we were actually slaves, to these other countries. Well, a good friend of mine, Vladimir, I won't give his last name. He probably wants to remain private, but Vladimir, I had him on one of my channels, or excuse me, one of my videos when the Ukraine war broke out a few years ago. And he was from Kiev, not Kyiv, Kiev. And he had a whole cool background on that. But he's a world-renowned orthopedic surgeon, invented a lot of things, was a pioneer in a lot of things, he's since retired from that, and he does wood turning. Is amazing. Just a good guy, and his wife, they're just good people from Russia through Israel, and then England, I believe, and then to America. And he had some awesome insights. And one of his insights was that the children of Israel had to be in the wilderness for 40 years so that a generation of people that knew no liberty could basically phase out, die, and a generation that knew the wilderness, embraced the wilderness, lived the wilderness, felt comfortable in the wilderness. They were the ones that were able to go into the promised land. We know that scripturally and everything, but just to have that different, just a slightly different take on it of not knowing freedom for so long, and being and liberty, and used to having things done for you. Whether you liked it or not, they were done for you, and it was a life of much more ease being in Egypt than being in the wilderness. And so we think of it's funny. I just had a thought come into my head years ago. I was up in the Wind River Mountains, and I had a couple of books that I would, of the Wind River Mountains that I'd take with me, and they're old, they're ancient books now, but that had trails and maps and things like that. And one of them was by, I think he pronounces his name Finis Mitchell. Well, he and his wife during the Depression set up some fishing camps and they actually planted a lot of the lakes with fish up in the Wind Rivers, just to scrape out a living. But he ended up exploring all of the Wind River Mountains, hiking and everything. Well, pretty cool thing. I would say this was back in the maybe mid 80s. If I can't remember exactly. I ran into him up in the winds. And here's this guy. He was an old guy, and he had a walking stick, a pair of bib overalls he was hiking in. And he basically would just go out for, a few days. He knew how to get food. He wasn't worried about that. He carried a little piece of plastic in his back pocket of his bib overalls that he could make a little shelter to get out of the rain. We used to call it Visqueen, that kind of thicker plastic stuff, clear plastic. And it was so fun to talk to him for a little bit. And I thought, man, I have a backpack with all this shiz in it, it's literally an umbilical cord to civilization. It was like the children of Israel going into Egypt, leaving Egypt, going into the wilderness, but having these runners go back and forth from Egypt to bring them Egyptian stuff, so that they could still feel like they were home. That's what we do. You go to places like REI or, I don't know, any other granola crunching store. People think that they're so outdoorsy, and they have, a $300 sleeping bag, a $500 coat, down coat, and a $600 tent, and then they have the best boots and the best this and best that, and they have the camp stoves, and then they go out and have a wilderness experience. I'm guilty of this, guys. I know the stuff. I use it. But in all reality, what you're doing is still connecting to civilization, if you will, and not embracing the wilderness experience. Now, look, I'm not saying we all go out, naked and afraid and just try to deal with the elements and try to figure it out. But I am making this comparison that when the tariffs are gone, or you raise the tariff so it equals the tariff that you're paying another country, and you're liberating yourself from being dependent on them, but you still haven't developed the skills or the ability to manufacture the things that you need, you're going to go through a bit of like, oh crap, what did I get myself into here, until it regenerates. Now, fortunately, there's still people and plants around that can be regenerated fairly quick in providing jobs and opportunities and innovation and technology that we can produce as a country instead of depending on another country. We, during the COVID and the whole mess there, remember the chips for vehicles, and you couldn't buy a new vehicle to save your soul. It was just the chips. We don't have any chips. Well, that should never happen again, right? So, but there's a price to pay for being in the wilderness. Now, 40 years, 40 days, Christ was in the wilderness, the Judean wilderness, which is there's a beauty about the Judean wilderness. I just love that place. Yeah, but it's so stark. It's so stark. It's not like the Bridger Wilderness in Wyoming, okay, with trees and water and springs, and you can just drink and fish and all that kind of stuff. It's by the Dead Sea, and it's hot and it's dusty and dry and rocks and very, very little growth. That's where John the Baptist did his ministry, right? Wearing the camel skin, eating locusts and honey, and he was a wilderness man, connected to the earth, the sky, just a spiritual being that Christ himself said was the greatest prophet ever, was John the Baptist. And so Christ went to him where he was in that wilderness, and he met that's where he prepared himself for his ministry and what he was going to do on the cross. That was where he prepared for that, began his preparation. Well, maybe not began, because he began right from birth, but really preparing for his ministry and what he was going to do was that Judean wilderness experience. The children of Israel had a 40-year wilderness experience, and they relied more and more on the Lord, less and less on Egypt. Okay, we had the golden calf episode pretty close to the front of that experience of the wilderness, and so that was that was like, hey, we need Egypt in our lives. Let's create a golden calf, and so we really need to focus on getting out of that bondage and focus in on venturing into the wilderness and having the ability to adjust and to learn and eventually not be so dependent and have that umbilical cord hooked to the life of ease, comfort, things taken care of for you. Need to be independent, which gives us the opportunity to have liberty, freedom, agency, boom, 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 all the way down. So I think it's a good analogy. I think we can learn so much from Scripture, both historically, financially. Obviously, the ultimate is a spiritual connection with a people, with individuals, and we're connecting to the great Jehovah, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's who we're trying to connect to. And we have to have that wilderness experience to do that. We just have to. And we have to have it as a country. And not just for economic reasons, but for spiritual reasons. So let's embrace this. I'm not saying everything Trump does is perfect and that, but something different has to happen. We can't keep doing what we're doing. It's crazy. I think of Joseph Smith in of all places, Liberty Jail, Liberty. Well, yeah, that's where he gained his liberty. At his wilderness in a pit, and many of you have been there. I've been there to the Liberty Jail, the recreation of it. It's disgusting. It's humiliating. Just the horrible conditions and cold, and all the persecution going on with his and the heartache with his family, with the other saints, all these things, and he's stuck in there with Hiram. They're suffering, but some of the greatest revelations come out of that wilderness. Without the wilderness, we don't have section 121, 122, and I can't remember, right? Is there a couple more maybe? But there's some just amazing revelations that come out of that wilderness experience. So we think back, some of us that have been around a little while, and even those that haven't been around for a while, but have had some intense experiences. There's a bit of sanctification process when you go through a wilderness experience, and have the opportunity to be humbled, to not feel comfortable. Comfort is nice. We all seek it. We all want it for other people. But there's really no growth when we're comfortable. There's no growth. So it's better to do things that bring us out of our shell a little bit. We do things that might expose us a little bit to our frailties, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And the children of Israel, I think it was just was it Caleb and Joshua, sorry. I think they were the last remaining guys but they had shown their ability to embrace the wilderness. And so they were the old generation, but allowed to lead and go into the promised land. And, we're going to have to figure out where we sit with this country of ours. Not all of you that listen here are, that you're not citizens of the United States of America. I get that. I've got quite a few in Canada, a few in Australia. G'day, mate. I get that, but for the most part, the audience here are from the United States of America, and my take is embrace this awesome era that Trump has the courage to initiate, and let's deal with the pains of not being that comfortable and going into the wilderness. But then let's also expand that and think of our spiritual growth and get out of out of Egypt, the comforts, and let's move into the wilderness. Let's have the great Jehovah as a pillar of fire at night and a nice cloud shading us during the day. Think of him always, and have the ability to embrace the challenges that face us, and feel comfortable in a sense of dealing with not being comfortable. All right. Well, that's it for this video. God bless. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.